CNBC TV18's Lessons in Leadership with Indra Nooyi.
Over the past 14 years at CNBC TV18, I've been trying to understand the principles of leadership. Can effective leadership be defined by an aphorism? What makes a leader good or bad? What's the difference between right-brain leadership or left-brain leadership? And which is more important? Is there anything beyond the mind? What about the leadership of the intellect? And more recently, I've been wondering if there is such a thing as a unique Indian style of leadership that's working on a global stage. So this was the genesis of Lessons in Leadership, and I'm thrilled to start this series with one of the most respected global business leaders of our time. Our guest today has been talked about and written about for years. Her every move is analyzed quarter after quarter. Her comments are discussed and debated on analyst calls and CEO forums. Her strategy has been applauded and critiqued. So I thought I would spend a few minutes on the not-so-obvious side of Indra Nooyi. I don't know how many of you know that she is a huge fan of The Daily Show. In fact, I believe she watches it every night. I also believe that she's a huge fan of the New York Yankees. Don't take my word for it. Take Henry Kissinger's, who says that Nooyi is a wild Yankees fan. She's apparently a karaoke fan too, and I believe she gave former Pepsi chief executive Roger Enrico a karaoke machine. She was the lead guitarist in a college band, and according to a 2010 Business Week report, she's known to patrol the office barefoot at times, and she's also known to sing in the halls. She believes sleep is a gift that God gives you, but unfortunately not a gift that she's been given. I better stop now before I begin to sound like a secret stalker. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Indra Nooyi, a leader with courage, heart, and a sense of humor. Thank you very much for joining us here on this very special edition of Lessons in Leadership. I want to start by quoting to you what Warren Buffett said. And he said, invest in a company that an idiot can run because someday an idiot will. How do you define leadership? How do you spot, develop, and nurture leadership? We've got a room full of young leaders here. What would your advice really be to them?
First of all, Shereen, thank you very much for having me in this inaugural show. I was just reflecting, I had a birthday about 3 weeks ago, and I was reflecting back on my corporate life, and I realized I'd been working for 35 years. So I have 35 years of lessons that I can draw from and talk to you about leadership. But I have to tell you one thing. The times today are very different than any other time in history. What we're experiencing right now is a level of volatility in the world that has never been seen in a long, long time. Here's the scary part. The amplitude of change is more pronounced, and the frequency of change is much more pronounced. And so what we have is leadership today cannot be that idiot that you talked about. We need a very refined leader, a very different leader that can actually power a company through these VUCA times, as they call it. What are we looking for? As a CEO, I tell you, I'm finding that I have to become a learning CEO. I have to go to school all the time because I'm learning new skills that I need to run this company, and I'm realizing that I'm not equipped to just coast. I have to constantly renew my skills. But more importantly, I have to surround myself with people who can help the company power through these VUCA times. What are we looking for? We're looking for leaders who are extremely agile, who can go from geopolitical calm to geopolitical crisis, from commodity volatility, where commodity prices collapse one day to another time when commodity prices are at an all-time high. We have to be able to have leaders who can go from country to country and navigate through issues because big companies like ours are global. We need leaders who can work through scarcity. Very often we are finding that we need leaders who can make something out of nothing. We need leaders who can collaborate because in today's world, if people are not willing to pick up a bag, go to some foreign country on behalf of the company, settle into that culture, and actually work with people there, we can't make business happen. So I'd say in a nutshell, we're looking for wickedly smart people who are agile, who are smart, who are collaborative, who are just the world's greatest leaders in this new model. Now here's the good news. As we look around and look for these people, we find that people of Indian origin, people who are educated in India, actually rise to the top. This is the good part of the whole thing, because agility, everybody in India has to be agile, because you're living in a VUCA world in India all the time. For us, we look at VUCA on a global scale, but for India, VUCA is another Tuesday. So you have to deal with volatility, complexity every day. So people who are trained as leaders here actually do very well in today's world. Indians are very, very flexible. They can up and go anywhere. And the most amazing thing is people who are educated in India have an unbelievable ability to network. So they can go to any country, settle down, and build relationships very fast. People who've been educated here can also do well on the global stage, because you've grown up in a very diverse, multicultural environment here in India, and you can take those skills around the world. The other great thing about people who are educated here is we don't have to search for them. Whether you're from the IITs or the IIMs, the Indian education system dishes out to us, foreign companies, multinational companies, the best and the brightest. So in today's VUCA world, as we CEOs look for truly global leaders who can power us through all of the volatility in the world, Indian leaders are rising to the top. So every time we go out to look for leaders, there's usually 4 or 5 people who've been educated in the IITs or the IIMs that show up. So the big question that I keep asking myself, if people who've been educated in India always bubble up to the top, why is it these leaders want to leave India? Doesn't India need these leaders? And even if they leave India, shouldn't there be a round-trip ticket for them to come back to India so they can help India get to a better place? So I think one of the big issues we should talk about is not just lessons in leadership or what do leaders need to do today, but what can India do to bring those leaders back to India so India itself can become an even more powerful economy going forward.
Let me start by asking you about the current headline. Pepsi is going to invest 33,000 crore rupees into India by 2020. The questions about the India story, and while in the long term it all looks good and we're hopeful and we're optimistic, in the short term, for you to have placed this bet on India at a time when the Indian economy has come down from a growth rate of 8.5% to just about 5%, were there questions at the board level on should we be placing this bet on India at this point in time?
Constantly. And look, at any time we make an investment in a country, we do discuss the country and its prospects. But let's go back and think of the fundamental India story. The basic India story is a very good one. The demographic dividend, India's got the best demographic story of any country in the world. The middle class coming up in India over the next 3 or 5 years is going to be more than the populations of the United States, UK, and France combined. So this is a big population. The Indian spirit is an entrepreneurial spirit. The Indian psyche is one that powers themselves through volatility. India is a thriving democracy. It's got a rule of law. So the fundamentals in India are very, very good. Okay? The political situation will evolve the way it evolves. I mean, we're not here betting on an election. We're here betting on the fundamentals of the country. And we hope that the government gets it right. Let's wait and see if the economy comes back, because as the finance minister said, India needs to grow at 8%. At a minimum, in order to get the unemployment rate down. So my hope is that whoever is in power, they work towards that number, because anything above 8% is great for the country.
But in terms of specifics, for companies to actually invest in India, at this point in time, what would the policy prescription be? What would you like to see the government do?
What companies need to come into countries, very basic. Good infrastructure, an investment climate that's welcoming, a taxation climate that's consistent across the country and as a policy over the years inside a country. An environment where the education system produces good workers so the company can use the talent to run its company. And lastly, a country where the overall industrial policy is consistent so that with change in government, there isn't abrupt change in policy.
My last India question before I talk about leadership. Would you consider coming back once you're done with Pepsi and all of that? Would you consider coming back to India?
That's a tough one, and I'll tell you why. Because several years ago, I committed myself to the United States. I became an American citizen, and I became American. My roots are in India, but I am American. And at some point, post-PepsiCo, I will go and do something to give back to the United States, but I'm committed to the United States.
Public life?
I don't know.
There's been a lot of speculation on that. Would that be something that you would consider?
Not political life.
No?
No.
All right. You know, you also talked about how it's getting increasingly difficult to run global corporations. This business of acting global or thinking global and acting local, how do you ensure that it actually works on the ground? It's great, every CEO talks about it, it's sort of become a cliche now, but how have you been able to effectively implement that on the ground?
Most of our international markets, all of our executives are local. We have very few expats across the world. If we have an expat, it might be a temporary expat, or it might be in a function like control or legal, where the capability didn't exist there before. Where the global comes in is we start to unite. How do we manage brands? How do we lift and shift innovation? What are our standard processes for new product development? What is our value system? What is our code of conduct? So the backbone of the company is what we focus on. But we allow each country then to have freedom within that framework. That's really how you run a large company, especially a food and beverage company, because we cannot innovate on kurkure tastes from New York or from Geneva or from Dubai. It happens right here in India.
Are you a left-brain leader or are you a right-brain leader?
Oh, it depends on the time of day and the issue. Right brain, left brain, any part of the brain that needs to be used, I'm game for it.
But you also truly believe that a CEO must have more than right and left brain, emotional intelligence. Explain to us what that means.
Well, I think in today's world, it's very hard to hold on to employees. The war for talent is real, and in the past, CEOs were extremely impersonal, and it was almost the standard model where the CEO was distant from the organization. I think in today's world, CEOs and C-suite executives should be highly visible. They should have empathy with the employees, but the more the company can accommodate employees' issues and concerns and somehow work with them to accommodate their issues, the more they want to stay in the company. And that's what we do in PepsiCo. We create an environment where we encourage diversity. We create an environment where women, we have a large number of women executives. If they have to go off and take a child to the doctor or go for a parent-teacher meeting, we make sure we give them the time.
I believe you wrote a letter to the parents of your senior management team telling them that they should be proud of their children and that they were great employees, that you enjoyed working with them. Is that part of this unique Eastern style of leadership? Is there really an Eastern style of leadership that's different from a Western style of leadership? Were people surprised when you did that?
I don't know about Eastern style. I think it's a very Indian style of leadership. And I have to tell you the story. What happened was when I became CEO, I came to India to visit my mother in Madras, and I went home to stay at home in Madras, and she woke me up at 7:30 in the morning, and she told me to get ready and sit in the living room, and I said, hey, I'm on vacation, I'm supposed to sleep till noon, I'm not going to get up. She said, I didn't have a choice, just get up and come sit in the living room. So I, as a dutiful daughter, I listened and sat down in the living room, and a stream of visitors started to come into the house. But they'd all come in, they'd greet me, and they'll go to my mother and say, you should be so proud of your daughter, you did such a good job bringing her up. And I realized then that all my executives who report to me, I had never told their parents what a good job they'd done bringing up their kids, because I'm benefiting from that incredible upbringing, because I have these extraordinary group of executives working for me. So I started writing to the parents of the people who report to me. Now what's interesting is, most of the executives, once they turned 18, their parents have never gotten a report card on them. So now they're getting a report card, but it's a positive report card. Okay? It's a really positive report card. And it's really unleashed all kinds of emotions, because parents are proud, the children are proud that the parents are proud, and it creates a bonding with the company that's simply phenomenal.
Where do you stand on this debate on whether women can have it all, not have it all, can you do it all, can you not do it all? Where do you stand on the debate, which is so hot right now?
But let me be brutally honest. You can have it all, but you can't be good at it all the time. So I look at my own life. I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a daughter-in-law, an executive, all of it combined. I have to be a CEO all the time.
Yeah.
That is a given. The rest of it, I juggle. Depending on the day, depending on the issue, I see which of those jobs I do well, I can do well based on the time, my energy level. If you talk to my husband, he'll say, let me explain your priorities. It's PepsiCo, 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 PepsiCo. Then it's the 2 daughters, your mother, and then I'm not on the list. Or you'll say, I'm on the bottom of the list. And I'll say, you're at least on the list. Just be happy, okay? But he's right. And what my husband doesn't understand is he's actually top of the list, but I don't tell him that. Because I'm busy. Okay.
And you've made the choice that Pepsi will be the first baby in that sense.
Absolutely, yes. What do we have to do to have it all? We have to build ourselves a family around us who's willing to step in, to take care of kids, to be the mom in the house when we cannot be mom in the house. I've had to do that my entire life, whether it's juggling relatives and my mother and my mother-in-law to come and help when I needed the help. You got to be nice to all of them. You can't not be nice and then expect them to help you out. But I think if you're willing to build yourself an ecosystem, you can have a lot of it all. Not all of it all the time, but you can have a lot of it.
But are the challenges faced by a woman CEO different from a man?
Men have their own natural locker room because they all are male CEOs in a very male environment. And so for a while I struggled with who do I talk to? Where do I get advice from? Because there's not enough of us. I think it's changing now. Many more women are rising to the top, and the whole situation is changing. I think 10 years from now, I think we're going to see a much different environment than we're even seeing today. But we have to make our own progress. We have to create our own tailwinds and create our own sisterhood, if you want to call it that, in order to move ahead.
What has been the hardest lesson for you to learn in this journey, in this 35-year journey?
Look, you can go 5 years at a time, different lessons, how to behave, how to dress, how to talk, how to act. I mean, one has to learn everything from scratch. As you move up, you have to elevate how you behave, how you think, the kind of knowledge you have to take away. Everything changes over time. There aren't too many people who are giving you advice on what to do. You almost have to observe and learn as you go along. You have to lean on people who you don't know too well, but you almost have to go and ask them for advice. And it's been a learning and evolving process over the last 10 years in particular, especially after I became president of the company. It's been a learning process where I've had to lift myself into this new position and move forward.
How has that changed? Is that true, by the way? Do you walk barefoot in office? Do you sing in the halls? Did you ever sing in the halls? Do you still do that?
This is what's called folklore, okay? There was a time, I think, when I joined PepsiCo in '94, when I was working on transactions at midnight, when my feet were hurting at midnight. I want you to know, I kicked off my shoes at midnight and put my feet up. Okay, it's midnight. And all of a sudden that became translated to Indra walks around barefoot in the office. Because that makes for good news, okay, good headlines. Indra walks around, yeah.
So the singing in the halls is part of the folklore.
I probably hummed in the hallway when I was reaching my office. Doesn't matter. You know what? Sometimes we focus on the most irrelevant of things, okay? If you look at me, I'm just about the most conservative person you can find. I'm not the kind that runs around barefoot.
Indra Nooyi conservative, really?
You don't think so? Oh my God, I'm as straight as they come.
You're bringing this very nice, interesting, warm touch. I'd like to call it the Indian touch, the womanly touch, sisterly, motherly, whichever works better for you. But I don't think that's happened a lot. Hard-nosed CEOs in America, that's what Wall Street likes, that's what they want. And interestingly, what's happening at India right now is a lot of the old, lovely, warm charm of leadership is probably going away. The kind of stuff that happened with the House of Tatas, the Birlas, even Narayan Murthy at Infosys, a lot of that is changing and people are actually wanting the hard-nosed stuff. I'm just fascinated at the change, and I also love to get your comments on, is this something we can expect more of in the US? Are you seeing more companies do this, or is it just you?
If you talk to the average executive in PepsiCo, they might even refer to me as Dragon Lady, or she's tough, and boy, she really drives a hard bargain. So what I'm talking about is not becoming soft and forgetting that hard-nosed business instincts. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is ruling a company, running a company with head, hands, and heart. In the past, it was head and hands. All that I'm suggesting is bring the heart into the workplace, because if you don't, you cannot get the loyalty of your employees. And the worst part is you cannot run a company with lots of mediocre talent. What you need is a few stars. You need a few very, very good people who can then pull up the others. And to me, empathy is a very critical part of bonding them to the company. I tell you one thing, every one of my executives who report to me, I know everything about their life, their families, their issues, their trials and their tribulations. If they have a personal issue at home, they do talk to me about it. And we find a way to help them. Now, they love PepsiCo, and when they leave the company, if they ever do, within months, they're looking to come back because they know that this company cares about them as much as we expect them to give to the company. And I think that's going to become the norm because everybody's going to try to hold on to talent, but you've got to bond the talent, not just buy the talent.
Excellent. Sairi.
One of the questions I have personally debated a lot of times is leadership and being vulnerable. So a lot of times we hear women saying, why is it hard for women at top to talk about hardships along the way or vocalize hardships that they have faced? And somewhere down the line, I was having a conversation here with my friend, and she said, maybe it's a leadership thing, it's not a women thing.
I talk about the hardships coming up the ladder because they're real hardships. When I talk to employee groups, I talk about the hardships because they're real hardships. And maybe if I talked about them and I talked about how I overcame them. The worst thing is to just whine about the hardships. It's how did you power your way through those hardships and then get to a better place? Because those are all lessons that you can impart to other people. If you're willing to approach it that way, if women together can form a sisterhood and talk about it, there's no harm. I think we ourselves have got to get more comfortable about getting our numbers together to talk about these issues.
But how much does it have to do, Indra, with this business of trying to fit in? You said that women are trying to be the man. Women are trying to fit into exactly the same stereotype because you want to get a place on the table. You want to be seen as one of them. And that comes back to the question. So you don't vocalize how you feel. You don't talk about how hard the journey has been. You don't talk about how unequal you're really made to feel in the workplace because you don't want to stand out.
That's a great question, Shereen, but you have to figure out how to be better than everybody out there, how to build your own confidence, and not constantly look for acceptance and endorsement from the men. Because if you keep playing that game, you're never on firm ground. Look, if my kids call when I'm in a meeting, I take the call. When my kids call my husband, he never takes the call. All right? That's the reality. But that's okay. So that's the point. You've got to be comfortable in your own skin. And once you show that you're good at what you do and you're comfortable in your skin, people just have to accept it. Remember, you've gotten to the C-suite. You're a big shot right now. Other people just have to live with it and suck it up, okay? So, just...
Valerie.
Did you, looking back 35 years, 30 years, 25 years, did you always know where you were going? And how did you, or was it more of a gradual evolution to where you saw yourself, what you wanted to achieve in building up your confidence?
Here's a piece of advice for everybody. If you go to a job and say, I want to be CEO, and start running for office, you spend your time on the politics and running for office, you forget that you have to do a very, very good job on the job that you've been given. I remember I'd sometimes turn in a board presentation to Steve Reinemann or Roger Enrico, who I both worked for, who are my predecessors. And I'd say, this is a board presentation, could you read it? They wouldn't read it. They'd say, just present it, it's fine. My experience is, whatever you're given, zoom out of it and look at it from 25,000 feet, 10,000 feet, and say, why was I given the problem? How does the solution to this fit into a broader framework that the company is trying to address? Should I go reach out to those people to make sure that I'm addressing this problem the right way, that it'll benefit the company? So if you think a little bit more expansively and zoom out before you zoom in, you'll find that people actually appreciate what you do.
I last heard you speak around 10 years ago, and you actually inspired me in a certain direction. But my question is little based on what you just said, which is when you're the CEO, you get to call the shots and you can actually create a more welcoming environment for yourself. Now, you can be a CEO the route that you have taken, but you could also be a CEO by being an entrepreneur. And my question is, did you ever consider that?
I didn't, because I was down this corporate ladder and, I was chugging along. I have to tell you something. All of you entrepreneurs, I have the ultimate, utmost respect for every one of you, because you created the company. You wrote the book on the company. I stepped into a book that's been written, and I'm adding pages to it, getting rid of some pages. So I stepped into a framework, and I'm making this company better. But you've created it from scratch. So all of you are entrepreneurs that started companies. I'm in awe of every one of you.
Advertising, particularly in companies by PepsiCo, is a very powerful medium. You spend so much on advertising. I wonder if you could consider for PepsiCo, in India at least, to bring out social messages very cleverly, but they have an impact much larger than all the humdrum ads that government can bring out. Thank you.
Let me tell you, in the United States, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we had a Super Bowl advertisement, which was for people who were hearing impaired. And it was a bold experiment, but we put the ad on Super Bowl, which was unheard of because it's an expensive slot, and nobody ever does a niche advertisement of that sort. But we decided to do it because we felt that group of people were ignored. So we decided to put the ad. So we as a company who always are at the edge of culture, we're always defining culture, we are not averse to putting out social messages. The only thing we have to be careful about is that as a consumer brand, we don't have a backlash from the social message. So I'll make sure I talk to our PepsiCo people to look at that.
Akila.
Hi, my name is Akila Shivadas. I'm part of a non-profit organization called Center for Advocacy and Research. You started your whole presentation about the difficult times we were living in and all the volatility. I'm just wondering, do you factor in all the resistance there is all over the world, to the kind of paradigms of development that companies like you bring into poorer countries? Does that trouble you? Do you engage with that? And if you do, how so?
Remember, all of our employees come from India. All of PepsiCo's employees come from India. And they might be PepsiCo employees when they come to work at PepsiCo, but they're members of the community when they go home. So they want PepsiCo to be a responsible employer in India. And if we want to have a long-term future in India, we have to make sure our business model is inclusive growth, is not, elitist growth, if you want to call it. So at every point in time, what we're looking to see is how can we expand the base of our business from a commercial aspect, from a community aspect, so we're doing the right thing for India. When we strive for water balance in all of our plants, we understand the problems with water usage in India. So we don't want to be just a net water user. So we work with agriculture, we work with rainwater harvesting, we build check dams in Aurangabad. We do that so that we can make sure that the communities in which we operate, we work on water balance.
Since you are talking about corporate social responsibility, Indra, let me ask you about what you think about the government's move as part of the Companies Bill to now make it mandatory for companies to spend 2% of their profits on corporate social responsibility. How do you see this business of making corporate social responsibility mandatory?
Personal point of view, bad idea. I'll tell you why. Telling companies how to spend their money, to me, is wrong. What we ought to be focused on is how does the company make the money? Okay? Does your business model make sure that you're doing the right things environmentally? Does your business model make sure you're treating people the right way? If the business model driving the profits is not a responsible business model, mandating how a company should spend the money is like asking you to do a project for the government which could be highly inefficient and not get to the solutions of the country.
Right.
Two very different concepts.
I agree with you. Yes. Questions?
The strategy for the organization, is it bottom up in terms of your teams coming up, or you seeing throughout the organization certain ideas that you are taking forward, or more of it is more intuitive, which comes from you and you're carrying your management team with your ideas? So that's one question. And the second question is a completely different question, that what is your advice to your daughters who may be very ambitious? I'm a mother of a daughter and just would like to hear your views on that.
Advice for my daughters. All that I tell my daughters is, do whatever makes you happy.
Is that what your mother told you?
Not really, because you see, the difference is that I grew up in a middle class Madras in the 60s and the 70s, or 50s and 60s, where the emphasis was on grades, rank. You better come, first, second, or third, or you better not come home. Your grades better be good. It was a whole different strive for the next thing culture. I tried that with my kids. It backfired, right? I always talk about how at dinner table we'll sit around, and my dad would eat fast and leave. My mother would sit down with the two daughters, my sister and I, and she'd say, I'm going to eat now. I want you to think about a speech you're going to give me at the end of dinner. If you were president of India, what would you do? Okay, and we both had to give the speech, and then she'd decide who to vote for. So as my kids grew up, my first daughter, my husband and I tried it with our first daughter. She looked at me and she said, Mom, get a life. I've got to watch TV. You see, it doesn't work because the environment is completely different. So my mother never said to me, dream big. She said, on the one hand, you can dream as much as you want because I've told you can be president or prime minister. On the other hand, she kept saying, I'm going to get you married off when you're 18. So it was a complete contrast. With my kids, I tell them, dream as much as you want. If you want to work for an NGO and do good for the world, don't worry about money, we'll take care of it. But if you work for a corporation, you're on your own, kid. You've got to pay your own bills. So that's what we tell our kids. Let me get to the other question you asked about, the strategy for the organization. PepsiCo is a big company, and you can never delegate strategy. Broad strategic direction has to come from the top. But I don't pull out the strategy from thin air. It comes because I've observed, I've talked to our people, I've gotten their input, I've looked at the world around me, around the company. It's through enormous study that you come up with a strategic direction for the company. And then you've got to rally the troops so that they buy into your direction, which is an enormous task. And if they are detractors, you've got to work with them to get them on your page. But after a while, if they still remain detractors, you've got to get them out of the company, because then they start poisoning the company. So you've got to play this buy-in process very, very carefully.
Indian leaders and doing well on the global stage, running global corporations, how much does this have to do with this tiger mom style of parenting? And maybe there is something to it, because this business of grades, you have to work hard, you have to achieve this, it's all goal-oriented. There's also a scarcity of, the options available to you. How much of that is linked to your success, you think?
Could be. A lot of it could be linked to success. Now that I look back, I grew up and there was no TV. So I went to the library all the time, read. There was no internet. So there was no 15 video games, 3 apps, Facebook, nothing. If you wanted to talk to somebody, you took a bus and went to see them. There was not even a telephone sometimes which worked. You played outside, so you were very healthy. You came back from school and you played. So I think many of us at my age are products of an environment which at that time sounded like, oh my God, we have nothing. But in retrospect, was a wonderful environment which prepared us for the world of today.
You started the leadership lesson by talking about amplitude of change and frequency of change. So my question is more around disruptive leadership that you spoke about. How do you communicate and achieve consistency across the ranks of a large organization like PepsiCo, and particularly you need to rampantly keep changing, driving change across the organization?
In the volatile world that we have, priorities do change. It's interesting. At the top, priorities change more often. As you go down the organization, you have to anchor some priorities, because if everything changes for large portions of people, they cannot handle the volatility. The top 3 levels of the company are critical. Those levels, you've got to teach them to insulate the rest of the organization from wild swings, but work with the CEO on the volatility. In volatile times, it's more important you're out there, you're visible, you show that you're in charge, and that you're confident. The third, video and the internet is a great vehicle to get messages out to the organization. So even if you can't travel to countries, get those messages out as much as you can, because the organization needs reassurance all the time. And the last thing, values are more important in volatile times. People have to know that you won't ever compromise your ethics, code of conduct because of volatility. And make sure people understand that's the true north of the company.
Final questions. I have 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Indra. When you were rising up the ladder, did you encounter any gentlemen who felt uncomfortable with those aspects, the womanly aspects of your style of functioning, your personality, and how exactly did you deal with it?
I'll give you a little story. I used to work for the Boston Consulting Group, and I was based in Chicago. My clients were all in the Midwest. I had a client up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and I was the only woman on the team. I was the only foreign-born woman on the team. And, I stuck out like a sore thumb. In the town, in the company, I stuck out like a sore thumb. There were times when I felt uncomfortable. But I have to tell you, the first 3, and the assignment went on for about 9 months. The first 3 months, I was uncomfortable. About the 4th month, I was pregnant with my first daughter, all right? And I'm a vegetarian. I needed very specific meals. This company that I thought was uncomfortable with me, they all got together. They all agreed on a schedule of vegetarian meals they were going to prepare for me. And they put up a schedule with the names of all the people, executives, wives, secretaries, everybody. They all got together in La Crosse, Wisconsin in this company and made sure I had a different snack every 2 hours for every day that I was in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Because at no point did I try to hide my pregnancy. No point did I say, I'm not sick. No point did I say, I want to hide my womanness. I said, guys, I'm working for you. I'm going to work my tail off. I'm sick as a dog, and I need a vegetarian meal. Simple. 4 simple things. And guess what? They were phenomenal. Even today, they're friends of mine. So if you focus on the job, and you focus on doing a damn good job with the assignment you're given, that gives you your tailwinds. And you don't have to worry about making allowances for the fact that you're a woman in a predominantly male world.
Indra, I know we're completely out of time, so my final question to you before we let you go. Has the emphasis on the priorities changed when you started Performance with a Purpose? And what is the next goal now that you hope to achieve as the CEO of PepsiCo? I know cost savings and all of that is on track, but what's the largest strategic goal that you would like to achieve in the rest of your tenure?
The most important thing for philosophies like Performance with Purpose is that you don't change the direction before you've accomplished all those goals. They're ambitious goals, lofty goals, but the right goals. And we've gone through hell as a global economy. In spite of that, we're going to stay the course and deliver on those goals. And if PepsiCo delivers on those goals, and we've delivered on many of them, but as we deliver on all of them, I think people are going to look back and say, what were the great companies of the last 2 decades? I think PepsiCo is going to be amongst them. Because of Performance with Purpose, because of who we are, because we set the standard for how a company should make money, not how a company should spend the money. But we did it all while delivering a good financial return for our shareholders. So people are going to look back and say, you know what? PepsiCo is among the defining corporations of the past 2 decades. And if they say that, I'd say I've left behind a phenomenal legacy for the next CEO of PepsiCo.
Well, you've been a defining leader. Indra Nooyi, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us here on the first Lessons in Leadership.
Thank you very much.
CNBC TV18's Lessons in Leadership with Indra Nooyi.